Good morning, and welcome to Winchester Unitarian Society's worship service for today, Sunday, October 4th. I'm Peter McEntee, serving as worship associate. Before we begin the worship service, please give your attention to these announcements. Today is our first Sunday without an order of service. Don't worry, the service will have order, but there is no published order of service document. If you have feedback about this change, let Reverend Heather know. We are seeking candle images and also Zoom support volunteers for online worship. Contact Reverend Heather. Note that there is now another way, yet another way, to give during the offering. You can use a link that will be posted. It's also accessible through our Winchester Unitarian Society website. Click on the Giving tab and then select How to Give and follow the instructions. This information will appear on your screen during the offering. Harvest the Power is a program for leadership development through faith formation and the application of Unitarian Universalist theology to the goals of anti-racism and social justice. This 6-session course begins in early November. To join, contact Liz Lintz at nominating@winchesteruu.org. To learn about the many good things happening at the Winchester Unitarian Society, be sure to read our weekly e-newsletter, Highlights. Some of the best stuff is listed at the bottom, so make sure you read all the way through it. If you want to sign up for Highlights, if you're not already receiving it,
it appears that Peter has frozen video, which could happen to the best of any of us.
Oh.
I encourage us to move on to a special announcement by Julie Kuhn.
Hi, I'm Julie Kuhn, and I'm co-chair with Marilyn Mullane of this year's Zoomabid online and live auction. You can tell I'm pretty excited because I already have my party hat on. The eBay-like online auction begins this Friday at 5 p.m. You'll receive an email that will contain the link to the auction software. We're not opening this up to the general public, but if you have some friends that you think might also enjoy bidding on the 100 or more services and items that you've all donated, then feel free to pass that link on to them. Any friend of yours is a friend of ours. Then, after the 2-week online auction, we're going to have the live Zoom auction on October 24th. This will be a Zoom bid auction, just like what we're doing now, but you will be able to bid via the chat function. New to us, but we think it'll be fun. So grab your party hats and your favorite beverage and join us to bid for the church.
And now, let us open our hearts and minds to the spirit of worship. Good morning. I trust that I'm now unfrozen and maybe Reverend Heather can give me a nod. Thank you. Welcome to Winchester Unitarian Society, a virtual wellspring of progressive religion in the Mystic Valley. As Unitarian Universalists, our faith does not require us to believe in any particular tenet or creed, and among us, we believe many things. But our faith does call on us to do certain things. Among them, we recognize and affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And following from that, our faith calls us to radically welcome anyone and everyone who chooses to gather with us. Whether you're a newcomer or an old stalwart, we're glad you're joining us this morning. Now, directly after the service, we'll continue our conversation in the chat, and soon thereafter, we'll go into randomly assigned breakout rooms for unmuted conversation. If you haven't tried a breakout room before, we encourage you to give it a try. We miss seeing each other, and Reverend Heather encourages me to remind you, you might enjoy it more than you think you will. After about 15 minutes of breakout rooms, the participants will see a message indicating they're welcome to return to the main room. As this is the first Sunday of the month, there'll be a conversation about the service in the main room. So if you wish to join the conversation, just click on the leave button and you'll be sent to the conversation space. But I now invite us to take a moment and greet one another through the chat function. Along with sharing your greetings, if you have some especially good news, let us know. We'll return to worship when we play the ringing of the bells at our partner church in Marosh Vasharhe.
As we gather together, may we remember, when you share with me what is most important to you, that is where listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you to shelter, that is where love begins. When I risk my comfort to ease your suffering, when I act against hatred, violence, and injustice, that is where courage begins. When we experience the full presence of each other because of our shared humanity, because of our differences, that is where holy gratitude begins. May this space be a table that is not complete until all are welcome. May this table be a space of beauty where together we create a series of miracles and where all that we share is sacred. May it be so.
If you wish to do so, please read together the words for our chalice lighting and light a chalice at home as we light the chalice.
All that we have ever been and all that we have ever loved joins us on the brink of all that we aspire to create.
A deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a deeper joy in this life we share. Oh, there we go.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Kelly Morgan, and I have the privilege of serving the Winchester Unitarian Society as the Director of Lifespan Education. And today I want to talk about listening. Now, listening is something most of us do with our ears because most of us can listen that way. We can hear the snap of twigs under our feet in the woods. We can hear the rain splashing on the rocks outside. We can hear the crackle of a fire, and we can also hear the silence and stillness of a late night or a very early morning, or the quiet that follows the sound of a chime. Some of us don't hear with our ears, or perhaps not very well. Listening is not always the same as sound, though. And if we do not hear sounds, we can listen in other ways. If we are fluent in ASL, American Sign Language, we can listen with our eyes as people sign to us and we sign to them. But even if we aren't fluent in that language, we can still listen with our eyes. We can see the rain splashing or see the popping of embers in that fire. We can still listen with other senses. We can feel the breaking twigs under our feet. Feel that snap. We can feel the splash of rain on our faces. We can feel the heat from the fire as it warms our hands. We can feel the vibrations of the words that we speak by putting our hands to our throats. Try that sometime. Or if you've ever watched a dog stick their head out the window of a moving car, and they not only stick their heads out, they usually open their mouths and stick out their tongues. That is listening to scents and smells on the wind that they can smell with their noses and taste on their tongues. For the dogs, A car ride is like going to a concert. There are many, many ways to listen. And some of us are better at listening with our ears, and some of us are better at listening with eyes, and some are better at listening with other senses. It takes work, but any one of us can get more skilled at listening with eyes or hands or nose or tongue as well as ears. There is one way that all of us can listen, and that is to listen with our hearts. Not the heart inside our chest that goes thump, 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 although we can listen to that too, particularly at night, but the invisible heart that's inside us. That's the heart that sees a sad face on a friend and listens to what that friend might be feeling. That's the heart that sees people who are confused or afraid and listens to what they might need. That's the heart that tells us to be kind. That's the heart that tells us to wait, to watch, to sit with, and to sit by someone else. That's the heart that tells you that you are good enough, even when you don't feel that way. That's the heart that makes life with each other a joy, even when we struggle or disagree. Listening with our hearts is not always easy, and we need to practice it a lot to get better at it, myself, like very much included. Listening with our hearts is good for you, and it's good for me, and it's good for all the people and all the beings in our world. And so when you think of listening this month, your ears, your eyes, your touch, your sense of smell, your sense of taste, and that invisible heart that listens so very, very well. Each week, we listen with our hearts in our sung blessing that we sing to and with each other. Let's sing it now.
May the light within you shine before you every day. May the light within you shine before you, guide your way, guide your way. May the love we share surround you and chase your fears away. May the light within you shine before you. This we pray, this we pray.
We now enter into a time of centering, first with words by Gordon McKeeman, and then a ritual, kindling of the light, a time to light a candle at home in recognition of a joy, a sorrow, or concern that you hold within. This ritual will be followed by a time of shared silence, after which we will sing hymn number 391, Voice Still and Small. Let us begin. Ministry is all that we do together. Ministry is that quality of being in community that affirms human dignity, beckons forth hidden possibilities, invites us into deeper, more constant, reverent relationships, and carries forward our heritage of hope and liberation. Ministry is what we do together as we celebrate triumphs of our human spirit, miracles of birth and life, wonders of devotion and sacrifice. Ministry is what we do together with one another in terror and torment, in grief, in misery and pain, enabling us in the presence of death to say yes to life. We who minister speak and live the best we know with full knowledge that it is never quite enough, and yet are reassured by lostness found, fragments reunited, wounds healed, and joy shared. Ministry is what we all do together. Before we transition to the kindling of the light ritual, we extend our heartfelt condolences to June Edwards, whose brother Ralph Greg Kirchhoff died this week after a long illness. One of 8 siblings, June is now one of 2 remaining in her family. June, our love is with you.
rain, sorrow and pain still will remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Last Sunday, I began my sermon by talking about an open and ugly confrontation between right-wing protesters and a local Unitarian Universalist congregation. This morning, I tell another story about painful conflict. We get a steady diet of these stories throughout the week, so I promise every sermon won't begin this way. I tell these stories in hope that we can find our way through these divisions so they are no longer part of everyday life. My colleague serves a Unitarian Universalist congregation in Massachusetts, not local, but not entirely far away. He posted this sobering account in a discussion group. My town's clergy has been having weekly Zoom check-ins since the pandemic. It's been great, but as things progress, our differences are rising to the surface. A couple months ago, the proposed letter to back the local police as a clergy association got shot down by my refusing to sign. Last Friday, our one Black member, I'll call him Reverend W, checked in with his heavy mourning over Breonna Taylor. One of 3 United Church of Christ ministers, Reverend J, in the group, checked in late after this. He is from a very politically divided congregation. J expressed blatantly false views about Breonna. There was a knock, the cops felt threatened. Reverend W turned off his video, revealing just a still photo of Breonna, while Reverend J kept talking about how much we need to support the police. I intervened to express my frustration with what he was saying, how he was saying things that weren't true. The whole conversation devolved into all the other white clergy trying to correct his views. W remained silent, and J just kept getting worse, such as alleging that George Floyd died of a drug overdose. He then objected to the association making any formal statement in support of Black Lives Matter. The rabbi chairing us calmly closed the conversation down, urging us to spend time in reflection before coming together again next week. There have been a flurry of phone calls expressing support for W and with each other. This morning, Jay informed us that he is withdrawing his church from our association and wants none of us to contact him again. I know my colleague is brokenhearted. When our circles of support fracture and crumble around us, when even clergy cannot come to consensus on how we navigate modern policing and the current Black civil rights movement, where do we find our strength and our guidance? I summarized this story as a case study for our program staff. We have committed to dedicating 1 meeting a month to advancing our knowledge, skills, and effectiveness in anti-racism. Our first of these meetings was this week. We began by talking about what would be useful to us in our work together. While I need to continue my historical and sociological learning, I also want practice thinking through real-life scenarios. So I told my colleague's story about his clergy group as a way for us to consider how we might respond. Any of us, any of you, could be on such a Zoom call, and all of us have the opportunity and the agency to act in such moments. We could see why my colleague was so troubled, but figuring out how things could have gone differently was less clear. Some saw the departure of Reverend J as a good thing, considering his obviously racist views, but as others named, by using his privilege to avoid learning about racism, those views remain unchallenged and unchanged. Perhaps the group should have ended its aggressive confrontation of Reverend J. But then what about Reverend W and his profound grief? Wouldn't silence from his white colleagues just make the soul wound deeper? How could members of this group of dedicated spiritual leaders have acted differently to avoid this painful outcome? Like many things, there is no easy answer. I tell this story as it seems hard for many of us to decide what to do right now. The twin crises of the pandemic and political upheaval deprive us of clarity. And the challenge of committing to a particular action is made more complex when it's not an individual, but a group of individuals deciding how to act. I've said it before many times, Where there are 3 Unitarian Universalists, there are 5 opinions. But this phenomenon of opposing objectives and how to respond to life is not just for Unitarian Universalists, but for human communities in general. True consensus is elusive. How does a group of passionate and faithful people arrive at such a rarefied state? This month, our theme is deep listening. So I begin this exploration by considering collective discernment, not simple discernment, like whether it might rain today, determining whether I bring an umbrella or not, but discernment about things that matter most, and discernment in collaboration with others who share our ethical convictions. This inquiry into discernment is part of an occasional series of services based on the book, How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going, by congregational consultant Susan Beaumont. She wrote her book in response to the swiftly changing landscape for U.S. congregations, but her ideas also speak to us in general, many assumptions about modern life and governance also in great transition. This inquiry is timely as this weekend our governing board, the Standing Committee, began its annual retreat, in part exploring spiritual leadership and how this stance helps articulate our current collective mission. As the Standing Committee's work reminds us, group discernment is a spiritual practice, possibly concluding with a sense of direction grounded in a wisdom greater than one person and greater still than the group itself, a direction grounded in the reality that the group listened with their hearts. Susan Beaumont states that while the practice of group discernment has deep roots in organized faith communities, such as the Quakers and their use of silent reflection to reach consensus, many congregations make decisions through secular methods, agenda setting, voting, and rules of order. These efficient ways of processing collective impulses are helpful, often critical, to make timely conclusions. Yet, Beaumont argues, leaders of the institutional house of worship often forget that there is a time and a place for more reflective, open-ended engagement on critical questions. When invited to function in this way, many faith leaders lack the experience to slow down, to engage each other differently, and to perceive the presence of the sacred in human life and human deliberations. For, as Beaumont writes, Ruth Haley Barton defines discernment as an ever-increasing capacity to see the work of God in the midst of the human situation so that we can align ourselves with whatever God is doing. Discernment is a quality of attentiveness to God that develops our sense of God's heart and purpose in the moment. In communal discernment, we move beyond the personal to see what God is up to within the collective whole. This language does not resonate with all of us. So with apologies to Susan Beaumont, I have translated her theology of discernment into affirmations that may embrace the theological diversity of a Unitarian Universalist community. A practice of discernment assumes that there is a force of creation, a spirit of life that can be experienced in our everyday world. As part of creation, we have the power to transform thoughts and ideas into tangible action. It is a great gift. Yet how we should act is often unclear, but creation strives for us to act in its spirit, affirming life and countering death. To act in such an intentional way requires our practice. The proof of the sacred in our decision comes through testing our conclusions over time, a course that is not always apparent or convenient for human needs. Such decision-making requires patience and faith in the process. A collective discernment process begins with stillness, often through meditation or prayer. It is common to have a prayer or opening words at the beginning of a congregational meeting, yet the ratio of time for open reflection to cognitive decision-making is reversed in the discernment process. A centered discerning group then turns to framing. Perhaps they have gathered to answer a specific question, yet there's value in creating a broad frame to acknowledge the larger context of the discrete question. Beaumont shares a hypothetical example of a congregation observing a decrease in worship attendance. They could ask, how do we attract millennials to worship? But instead they asked, what is the future of worship at our congregation? Before they explore this broad question, the discerning group engages in grounding. What are the principles commitments, and values that will shape our discussions. It is understood that the ultimate goal is to hear God's will for the group or to tune into the spirit of creation. So the next step is letting go of our human agendas. When approaching a question of great importance, people come with already formed bodies of information and opinions. Susan Beaumont often invites group members to write down their conclusions and then collects them. This informal ritual allows them to shed their attachment to outcomes. Next comes listening, with many opportunities and ways to collect input. With this body of ideas, the group then whittles the list down through exploring, weighing options, and choosing. Then, with a conclusion in hand, comes the testing. Is the through line of the group's purpose, the broad frame, and the grounding commitments present in the outcome? When we return to stillness and prayer, what confirmation do we receive that we're on the right path? I began by telling you about a painful conflict in my colleagues' clergy group. I wonder if, had they found their way to stillness, to prayer, to naming the broad questions before them and their shared values, had they committed to setting aside their passionate conclusions, there might have been a different outcome. Is such a holy conversation even possible over Zoom? We will never know the answer to these questions, but I leave us with a well-known Unitarian Universalist story summarized by Jessica York, reminding us of the power of community purpose and what can happen when we listen with a spiritual ear, with our hearts. She writes, "There is a saying that people were created with 2 ears and 1 mouth because we should listen twice as much as we speak. When we come together in community, we have the opportunity to listen to each other and gain a perspective greater than what we would have alone." In 1948, most congregations and houses of worship in the United States were segregated by the color of their members' skin. The First Unitarian Society of Chicago was one of these congregations. Although their church was located in a neighborhood with many African Americans, only whites could join, according to the bylaws of the church, and according to custom. The day came when many members began to believe they needed to take action against racism. The minister, the Reverend Leslie Pennington, was ready for this day. So was James Luther Adams, a famous liberal theologian and social ethicist who was a member of the church. Along with others, Reverend Pennington and James Luther Adams proposed a change in the church's bylaws to desegregate the church and welcome people, whatever the color of their skin. They saw this as a way to put their love into action. When the congregation's board considered the desegregation proposal, most of them supported it. However, one member of the board objected. "You are asking everyone in our church to say they believe desegregating is a good way to tackle racism. What if some members don't believe this?" Respectful debate ensued at the First Unitarian Society of Chicago. Both sides felt in their hearts that their belief was right. Perhaps they were so busy trying to be heard, they forgot to listen. And so they kept on talking. The debate went on in the board meeting until the early hours of the morning. Everyone was exhausted and frustrated. Finally, James Luther Adams remembered that we should be listening twice as much as talking. He asked the person who had voiced the strongest objection, "What do you say is the purpose of this church?" Suddenly, everyone was listening. Probably the person who objected was listening especially hard to his own heart, as well as to the words he had heard from other board members through the long discussion. The board member who opposed opening the church to people of color finally replied, "Okay, Jim, the purpose of this church is to get a hold of people like me and change them." The First Unitarian Society of Chicago successfully desegregated. There are things that you know, and there are things that I know. When we are together and listening to each other with ears and hearts, we know more. I did not watch the presidential debate this week, but based on formal and informal accounts, it's safe to say that there's a hunger for people to engage each other in healthier ways. In the wake of that public debacle, and with the wisdom of Susan Beaumont's work, I ask, do we have the courage to be vulnerable, to sit in silence together, to pray together, to believe different things about the divine, but also to believe that there is a force of creation we can draw on to advance life? Do we have the patience to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts? Whether it's a meeting here at WUS, or a family discussion, or a meeting in your workplace or your neighborhood, through the clatter of all the ideas and agendas, we remember what our ultimate purpose as a group may be. How can we let this great purpose change us? As we turn back towards these bewildering times, I remind us that how we decide to move forward helps define the direction. We do not need to pray over whether we need an umbrella or not, yet who we are and who we are in relation to one another, and what this means for important matters like the honoring and survival of African Americans and the recognition of ethical police officers does warrant careful attention. May we listen deeply, may we choose well together.
As Unitarian Universalists, we strive to live our values through our words, our actions, and through how we allocate our resources. With the offering, it is our practice to share half of all undesignated donations with various organizations whose aims are aligned with our values. This morning, we share our gifts with the American Civil Liberties Union, whose mission is to defend individual freedoms guaranteed by the US Constitution. You may donate in a number of ways. You can give online through our website, or you can use the smartphone app Give Plus, or you can donate through PayPal, or you can write out a paper check and mail it to Winchester Unitarian Society, 478 Main Street, Winchester, Mass. 01890. Please write or type the date of your offering in the memo line or comment field. Note that contributing early and frequently, rather than giving one lump sum for a period of time, is easier for us to process, and it empowers us to send our collective gift as soon as possible. Our practice is to invite first-time worship attendees to be our guests. In lieu of a contribution, please complete the virtual visitor card so that we can stay connected beyond this Sunday. Those who wish to do so are invited to join in reading together the community affirmation. We gather not for ourselves alone, but to use our common power to build the beloved community within and beyond these walls. We create and reaffirm this covenant this day to make justice flourish, to practice compassion amidst difference, and to embody transformative love. Let us now join in singing our closing hymn, number 90, From All the Fret and Fever of the Day.
That's when we turn over. From all the fret and fever of the day, let there be moments when we turn away, and deaf to all confusing outer din, intently listen for the voice within. In quietness and solitude we find the soundless wisdom of the deeper mind. With clear harmonious purpose let us then bring a richer meaning to the world again.
With what benediction shall I leave you? This: in your life, may you know the holy meaning, the mystery that breaks into it every moment. May you live at peace with your world and at peace with yourself. And may the love of truth guide you in your everyday. Amen.
Please join us in reading together the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. This service has ended, but our life of service continues. Let us continue the conversation in the chat and then go into the breakout rooms and, if you wish, the after worship conversation.